Okay, good morning, everybody. Thanks, Jordan. My name's, as Jordan introduced, my name's Phil Searle. I'm joined by my colleague, Chewy Michelle, and we will be introducing ourselves in a second. But just as a placeholder for today's session, a reminder, it's about blockchain. The title is Next Step in Your Automation Journey, and we're part of the Intelligent Automation Week virtual conference. So, Chewy, next slide, please.
Phil, did you see the next slide?
No, I can now. There's a little bit of a delay there, Chewy, but we'll see how it goes. Okay, so what's the purpose of today's session? So I'm sure lots of you have heard about blockchain, and many of you, like me, when I first came across it, didn't really understand what it was. Can you go back again, Chewy? It's jumped ahead of screen. There we go. And probably just link it to cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, etc. But the purpose of today is to sort of strip it back to basic principles, explain what blockchain is, what it isn't, how it links to the hyper automation, intelligent automation journey to date, talk about some key considerations when looking at blockchain, and then Chewy will run through some actual practical examples and approach to implementing blockchain, what you should consider, and also some case studies. So we're really using this as sort of a boot camp 101 on what blockchain is and hopefully what it isn't, and trying to explain it in relatively simple terms, and then be practical about how you might be able to use this in your journey in your organizations at the appropriate time, linking to your, as I say, your broader intelligent automation / hyper automation journey. So that's the purpose of today, and that's what we're going to be covering hopefully in the next just under an hour now. Okay, next slide, Chewy, please. Thank you. So as a quick reminder, I'm Phil Searle. I'm the founder and CEO of Chessy Partners. I've been in business transformation, shared services, technology, and intelligent automation for many, many years. Prior to founding Chessy, I was actually a former corporate controller at 3Com in the late 90s and early 2000s, a former business unit CFO, and I've run global shared services operations, and I'm a regular speaker and presenter at these events and enjoy these sessions. So looking forward to another session today. Chewy, do you want to just quickly introduce yourself before we get on with the rest of this meeting?
Thank you, Phil. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so honored to be here, sharing with you Chessy's perspective on blockchain and RPA. As Phil mentioned, practical examples as well. I've been around shared services and IT for over 20 years, and over the last 6 years, very close to automation programs and RPA. Happy to be here.
Thanks, Chewy. So next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to just cover a little bit of background on Chessy, then we're going to dive into the automation journey and where we are, trends. We'll talk about blockchain, some potential use cases, linking RPA with blockchain in a practical way, some key considerations on a roadmap for implementing blockchain, and then some case studies, as I mentioned. So next slide, please, Chewy. Okay, so Chessy Partners, just a bit of background, about nearly 15 years old now. Can't believe that when I say it. I founded it back in 2006 after I left my last line role. I'm based here in California, but we have teams located across the globe. For example, Chewy's in Mexico, but we have teams throughout the Americas and over in Europe as well. We do basically three main service delivery offerings, what I would call the more traditional shared services, which is end-to-end roadmap, implementation, optimization, deployment. So the design, build, deploy, business case, etc. for shared services. Then on the right-hand side, you see broader business transformation, which can include end-to-end functional redesign, operating models, outsourcing to the extent outsourcing is relevant to your organization, technology enablement, SI support, system integrator support, mergers and acquisitions, and business continuity planning, which is our broader business transformation. And in the middle, we have what we call robotic process automation, but really covers broader intelligent automation, including things like machine learning, intelligent automation, etc. Although most of our work has been in robotic process automation, we're going to be touching on that today, linking it to blockchain. That's basically who we are. Next slide, please, Chewy. This is a splash of some of our clients on a page, some brand names. On the left-hand side, you see more our higher education public sector experience. In the middle, you see our global multinational. Hopefully you recognize many of these names we supported over the last 15 years. And the right-hand side is really our emphasis on Latin America, where we have a lot of clients in Mexico and South America, as you can see on this slide. Okay, thanks, Joey. All right, so where are we in the automation journey? So transformation is inevitable. If you don't see that in today's environment, especially, then you're going to fall behind the 8 ball. And what we call, or what has been called, I should say, the fourth industrial revolution is coming. So what do I mean by that? As we move to the next slide. So what is the fourth industrial revolution? Let's answer that by saying, what were the first three? So a little bit of history lesson for myself when I first looked at this. The first industrial revolution was using water and steam power to mechanize production. The second was electric power, which enabled and helped supported mass production. So the lines, the concept. And the third was, as more familiar and more recent, was the digital revolution, which was the change from analog to digital, the invention of the personal computer, the internet, and ICT, information communications technology, which obviously was a significant revolution in itself. The fourth, current industrial revolution, is characterized by a fusion of many of these technologies that's blurring the lines between what the physical aspect, the digital, and the biophysical and biological spheres. And you've seen some of that in obviously the recent surge and push for a vaccine for COVID-19. And that's been definitely energized by the fourth industrial revolution. So what is it characterized by? Well, a number of technologies, including robotics and robotic process automation, machine learning, artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, quantum computing, biotechnology, 3D printing, autonomous vehicles, and of course, blockchain, which we'll be focusing on largely today. Okay, so just drilling down a little bit more on excluding blockchain. So one of the things I've talked about. So you've got robotic desktop automation, robotic process automation, digitized RPA, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. Those are the sort of five of the main areas that businesses have been looking at to enable their within their organizations. So just quickly, robotic desktop automation tends to be automation, as it says, on the desktop. So that's attended process execution with a bot sitting on a desktop along with the user, the human user, and working side by side. Robotic process automation can be on the desktop, but is also can be on the server and is more distributed, and therefore is not necessarily restricted to the desktop, and it can be automated, attended or unattended. So that's just a brief definition of robotic desktop automation, robotic process automation. Digitized RPA is actually, quite frankly, the further enablement through mobile and web and into IVR and speech recognition of of RPA, which allows RPA to work with even less human intervention. Machine learning is a combination of robotics with some analytics and decision engines and introduces an element of judgment. Artificial intelligence is a combination of robotics with analytics and, as it says, artificial intelligence, which adds element of intelligence to the whole decision engine process. And it combines machine learning or statistical modeling to continually review, optimize decision makings and recommendations. So that's just a quick digital transformation on the page. So what's hyperautomation? You may have heard this phrase. Hyperautomation as was described by Gartner at the end of 2019 as a trend for 2020 is the #1 top 10 strategic technology trend. So it's not just about RPA. It increasingly includes intelligent and cognitive solutions that learn, adapt, and also work more widely with unstructured data across more complex processes. And that all links to the arrival of hyperautomation. So where does this all fit together? So on the left-hand side, you have artificial intelligence, machine learning, native integrations, business process management, process mining. I'm sure you've heard a lot about process mining in the last few months and a couple of years, and advanced analytics plus RPA all equals this hyper-automation box, which again is a mix of technologies, analytics, and AI that augment human capabilities, so work alongside humans to allow them to complete processes in what's called a hyper-automated, semi-automated, or even an autonomous way. That's what we mean by hyper-automation. Okay, so what about blockchain? which is the main focus of the presentation today. So you can see on the left-hand side some of this historical, although history is moving very fast these days. Standardize, eliminate processes, automate using RPA and RDA, etc. Hyper-automate by adding in intelligent RPA like digitalized RPA I mentioned earlier, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. And then you have blockchain, which actually sits outside of your internal organization. That's the key difference. Blockchain is not within your enterprise, within your organization. It actually sits outside your organization, can leverage and work with hyper automation, and Shui will talk about that later, but it actually sits outside, and that's one of the uniquely different features of blockchain. Okay, so let's dive down a few more specifics on what exactly blockchain is and some potential use cases. All right, so definition of blockchain. Remember these words, I mean, distributed ledger technology. So that's very important, what's called DLT for short, distributed ledger technology. If you think about blockchain in that way, it's basically a group of ledgers that are distributed in the outside of your enterprise, but they are a basic ledger. They're a type of database that stores information in blocks. That's what a blockchain is. And once a block is completed, it then closes out and then it's attached to a second block. And as you build the block, it's attached to each other in a chain, hence the name blockchain. So each block has its own level of unique data in it that's then secured through hashing, which we can touch on a little bit later. But it's basically then made into a chain. It's not a traditional ledger in the sense of a line ledger. It's not a traditional database, but it has elements of both of those, and it is distributed outside of your organization amongst, as it says here, a distributed network of computers, and it happens in real time. Now, you've all heard about blockchain. We're not going to be focusing on, Bitcoin. We're not going to be focusing on that today. But that is obviously an example of distributed ledger technology and blockchain and Bitcoin transactions. We're going to be focusing today more on business blockchains, which is the application of blockchain technology to support business needs. And so on the right-hand side here, on the bottom, you see this ledger, this distributed ledger is basically replicated outside of your own internal network to a bunch of peer-to-peer networks, which can be computers. And each one of these owns its own element of the blockchain. And each one is a node within that whole blockchain. And each one has a transparent replicated copy of that blockchain. We're not going to get into too much of the detail of the security here. We're going to touch on it, but that's the unique difference of blockchain. It's a group of data in blocks attached to a chain, and the chain is consecutively built up over time. So what are some of the key features and benefits? Again, I've mentioned it's distributed. So it's not held internally by one unique user. It's distributed amongst a number of nodes. If you are in a block working with other organizations, it's a consensus-driven unique trust. Because each node has a replicated copy of the same blocks, no one can then tamper with that data without everybody understanding that that data has been tampered with and therefore eliminate that block. There are immutable transactions, which means they are basically time-stamped and unchangeable. So they are sort of locked in time and cannot be edited. And then hashing-based data security, which is basically a way, it's not encryption. Encryption is like a two-way security protocol. Hashing is like a one-way, which basically uses a hash and attaches it to the block as a unique identifier that can't be changed. And then it's sequentially added to the previous hash, and that's as you build up the block. And then what it can do, it can vastly, significantly increase the speed of completion of and settlement of transactions. And that's why it becomes a really potentially very strong benefit for businesses. And has a greater protection against cyber threats and reduces the role of intermediaries. So it's, I've mentioned before, it's peer-to-peer. So there isn't an intermediary clearinghouse or bank in the case of something like a Bitcoin, or some sort of third-party agent. It's basically peer-to-peer, so it eliminates the role of those intermediaries. And part of the value is that once a transaction has been confirmed in a block, it can automatically produce an immediate smart contract that can be immediately actioned and becomes reality at that point in time. So there's not a delay. And we'll come back to a little bit about what that means in practice in a second. So what are some of the core benefits of technology? They are really, sorry, just back up one slide again, Chewy. They're around collaborating with other parties in an ecosystem and enabling cross-industry partnerships in a trusted, immutable, rapid way. All right, thanks, Chewy. Next slide. Okay, so what's some other relevant definitions? Well, when Chewy and I were thinking about this presentation today, we wanted to be clear on definitions. So you'll see within this slide deck, there are a number of definitions to support because it's clear, it's very important. So what is a blockchain platform? So a blockchain platform is actually, as it suggests, the platform that enables the development of blockchain-based applications. That's really what it is. And there are really, in theory, 4 types of blockchain platforms, but in reality, only 3. And you can see that on the left-hand side of these, you've got private, public, permissionless, and permissioned. And so in the top left is basically where you have a public blockchain platform that doesn't require permissions to join. So anyone can join, anyone can read and write and commit to it. Generally hosted on public servers with anonymous data. It is still highly secure, but it is public and permissionless in terms of joining, reading, writing, committing. An example of a technology there is Ethereum, and we'll come back to that in a minute. Top right, you see permissioned public. So anyone can join and read, but only authorized participants can write and commit. That's the key point there. Again, you see Ethereum there. Ripple is another example in that of a platform there. And the bottom right-hand side, this is permissioned private. So only authorized participants can join and read, and only the network operator and authorized nodes can write and commit. This is highly scalable within its permissioned space. But and examples in here are Hyperledger and Corda, as you can see on here. The majority of enterprises use cases are currently in a permissioned and private network. That's partly to do with trust, and we'll touch on that later, but that's where most of the use cases exist today. On the right-hand side, we just list the main platforms: Ethereum, Hyperledger, Fabric, IBM Blockchain, Multi-Chain, and some others. R3 Corda you can see on there. And we try and split those into those 4 potential categories of permissionless, permissioned, public, and private. And you can see some of those platforms cross a number of those, offer different solutions. Thanks, Chewy. All right, so this is some research done by HFS Research in the current year, which is really around the definition and some sort of further definition and breakdown of the blockchain platform. So the blockchain platform choice for enterprises is according to HFS Research, really a 2-horse race between Hyperledger Fabric and Ethereum. Hyperledger Fabric, some of the characteristics is open source, production ready, permissioned blockchain designed for enterprises, although it has all other options, as I mentioned. And Ethereum, which is currently the most mature permissionless blockchain platform out there, and is known for its very good use of smart contracting and cross-industry adoption. R3 Corda, though, I will say, is also well known, especially in financial services. So this is some more data, and I'm sure you can access. You can either access these slides through IQPC, SSON, or direct from Chessy, and you can look through these slides at your own leisure after this presentation. Okay, next slide. Okay, so what's a consortia or a consortium? As you may have heard as well, what is a blockchain consortium? Well, it's basically a blockchain network where multiple organizations come together, trust each other, and maintain the system. It's by definition permissioned and not public, and every organization within the consortium gets similar treatment. And you don't allow any abuse of the platform within the consortium. There are 3 main different types of blockchain consortium. There's a business-focused consortium, a technology-focused consortium, and something that's dual-focused. The business-focused one is the one where it's really developed for a business need, for a specific business issue. For example, an example here is TradeLens. Technology tends to be more about the platform than the actual user, the business side of it. And dual focus is a bit of both. On the right-hand side, we have some examples of the top 20 blockchain consortia. As you can see there, sourced from 101 blockchains, and you can see BankChain on there. You can see IBM Food Trust on there. Trade Lens is another example. Marco Polo. So these some are examples of consortia, and some are co-hosted by the providers. You can see some examples with IBM, Hyperledger as well. So depending on whether it's business focused, technology focused, or dual focused, will determine the most relevant consortium you should be joining or looking to join. All right. So who are some of the major solution providers out there in terms of implementation partners and technology providers? On the top half of this slide, you have many of the implementation partners. I'm sure you recognize many of these names: Accenture, Cognizant, EY, etc. Deloitte, Chessy. We provide these services as well, Chessy Partners. And major technology providers in this space: IBM, Microsoft Azure, Consensus, Oracle Blockchain, AWS, and Alibaba Cloud are some examples of some of the major technology platform providers in this space. All right. So what are some of the popular business blockchain use cases? Again, focusing now on business blockchain, not cryptocurrency. So this is a great chart produced by HFS in, again, the current year. It's a pie chart of some of the most popular use cases. You can see on the right-hand side that supply chain is the area that's seen the most adoption, mainly around what track and trace elements of supply chain. And you can maybe start to think about why that might be valuable. Track and trace and capturing data in blocks and tying to another block, and then tracking a particular product or system, or even a vaccine as an example, through a supply chain. You can see why that might be a very powerful use of blockchain. Document management is also very popular, mainly around use cases focused on records management. And then you get a large number of industry-specific cases around insurance claims, settlements, lending, trade, etc., which actually comes on the next slide, and intercompany reconciliations, which I'm sure you can start to think of some opportunities in that space. And on the left-hand side, you have some others, including on the left-hand side, you see some other, for example, identity is a big area. I've actually just having to identify something myself for a company, and using blockchain and KYC, know your customer, as part of the way to do that. And then fraud and compliance, finance and accounting, some other examples on the left-hand side. Okay, thanks, Chewy. So specifically in finance accounting, 3 examples here. Procure to pay, a lot of opportunity in procure to pay, where blockchain can provide a full and verified record of transactions in, as I say, a chronological format, shared in real time, in a transparent way, trusted data, etc. You use a business blockchain to agree on the details of an order: quantity, price, quality, time of delivery. The confirmation is created automatically on the blockchain based on the agreed data, thereby removing the risk of a misaligned confirmation. It's done immediately, and the transaction is confirmed between the two parties. Again, between the two parties. A lot of this is about between two parties. The middle is just an example of automated settlement of real-time VAT. On the right, just in the interest of time, on the right-hand side, buyer and seller agree on an invoice on the blockchain. The smart contract that I mentioned earlier calculates the VAT and submits the VAT returns, and that is instantly updated between the company and its relevant VAT authorities. That's rapid, immediate, accurate, confirmed. Left-hand side is traditional paper flow and sending invoices and receiving payments and filing returns and sending money, etc. So very old school. So that can take months, whereas on the blockchain, it can take minutes. And then one final example in finance and accounting, this is an example seen by Deloitte, sees it as a tool for bringing all parties involved in intercompany settlement onto the same platform, leveraging what's called a corporate coin currency. Now, I personally can see significant applications of this, because intercompany is often a mess across global multinationals and organizations with multiple legal entities. So anything that can improve that in an instantaneous, trusted way is a real opportunity. So Deloitte and we see intercompany settlement as being a significant potential use case in the future. All right. Okay, so with that, I'm going to hand over to Chewy. He's going to talk a little bit more about connecting RPO blockchain and some specific examples, case studies, and how to actually go about looking to assess and implement blockchain. So Chewy, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. And as Phil mentioned, we're going to focus on business blockchains, not Bitcoin, not cryptocurrencies, but business blockchains. And how this connects to RPA, it's actually very interesting because the blockchains can operate as a standalone solution. But the value realized when you start adding other technologies, such as RPA, machine learning, the Internet of Things, it really helps you to redesign your end-to-end process. For example, right, and I like this example, if you look at it from an RPA perspective, for example, digital workers can overcome challenges to implement the use of blockchains. For example, these digital workers or bots can be trained to carry out tasks and transactions that are being recorded securely by the blockchain. And in the same token, RPA can be deployed without blockchain. However, if companies are looking at this from a strategic perspective, and they want both RPA and blockchain to become core to the digital transformation of the enterprise, blockchain use cases will eventually show up. So more and more, you're going to start hearing about use cases. So picking the right use case for using blockchain technology. According to recent studies that we've been looking at and reading and sharing, 6 out of 10 companies, they haven't looked at blockchain. And it's not that there's not an opportunity to use blockchain. It's just that there's just too much information about blockchain, and it has become very complex to explain blockchain. So what we're trying to do today, it's just to put it in simple terms, right? But the net of it is many companies are not exploring blockchain because they simply don't get it, or they don't have a partner next to them explaining the practical use case for blockchain technology. On the other hand, right, and imagine RPA 10 years ago, right, there was a lot of talk about it, right? There were different companies looking at robotic process automation from different perspectives. But if you look at RPA today, 9 out of 10 decision makers in the organizations think that RPA will become and is becoming core to the digital transformation of the company. So what's going to happen with the blockchain in the next few years? I think it's going to be very similar to the trends we've seen over the last few years with RPA and with automation as an overall. How do we connect, right? So as we said, these two technologies can operate as standalone solutions. You can run an automation program. You can decide to go for a blockchain project, but the net of it is that to get or to maximize the potential, to maximize the value, it's how do you use different technologies to create value for the company. So with these technologies coming together, this is an example, right, that you can see. This is an end-to-end letter of credit transaction. And there are 7 steps that you can see here in the press. Look at it, the 7 steps in your blockchain, exchanging transactions in a secure way. So blockchain in this case will provide a distributed shared ledger to all the processes and all the information that is needed for the letter of credit across the different players, right? So you have on one hand a transaction and a process, and you have players. So in this case, you have an importer, you have an exporter, you have an issuing bank, and a confirming bank. And blockchain provides somehow the single source of truth. There's 4 parties, they all have their own ERPs, and what blockchain connects without intermediaries is this transaction to flow across these 4 players. So blockchain provides a smart, trustworthy, and a smooth exchange platform for all the involved parties. And on the other hand, you can see the bots on the top. They play a central role in automating different aspects of the business. So you can think about RPA as to replace the human intervention when entering transactions and receiving transactions, confirming transactions, even verifying documentation from either of the parties involved here. And as you can see, in this use case, we have 4 bots that are taking on the transactional work associated with the process, eliminating human errors, but also operating in 24/7, enabling the blockchain to operate real time. Phil, I don't know if there's any thoughts, comments here so far?
No, I just think it's a really good example of an end-to-end process transaction involving internal and external parties, importers, exporters, and then connecting them through the blockchain distributed ledger enabled by some humans and some RPA. It's a really good example. This one comes from IBM, and it's really about, you know, a really old traditional letter of credit transaction, as Chewy has described, but it just makes that so, I mean, letter of credits, I remember 20 years ago, 30 years ago, when I was working in seafood industry, what a pain letter of credits were in getting them to be written up and cleared and approved and documented, et cetera, and paid. I mean, this can significantly enable that process. You still see there are humans involved, and you can bring in RPA to assist with the human elements, but the blockchain acts as the really robust, rapid, trusted, between third-party element of that whole transaction. So it's a really good example. That's what, yeah.
Thanks, Phil. So as Phil mentioned, right, when you think about hyper automation and hyper connection, right, because hyper connected is what the use of different technologies can bring to the table. So your ERP or your hyper automation focuses on the optimization of your internal processes, and you can call it, right, it's your order to cash, your record to report, your procure to pay. Whereas your blockchain, what blockchain brings really to the table, it's looking externally. And how do you deal with your suppliers? And how do you deal with your clients? And how do you deal with banks, financial institutions with no intermediaries, right? So it's almost using all the capabilities built with your hyper automation and then connecting those capabilities with others externally. And what it actually becomes, it's an ecosystem, right? It's an ecosystem. So more and more businesses are looking beyond only automation in the enterprise, and there's more questions, there's more interest in looking at blockchain as a way to hyper connect external. Let me move the chart here. I just lost the chart. So now we're going to talk about a little bit about considerations when implementing blockchain, and this is lessons learned from Chessy and lessons learned by talking with experts in the industry as well. Key considerations, right? Like any technology enablement. So look at this as technology. We have learned that before moving forward with any blockchain initiative, it's very important to understand the impact to your operating model, right? What blockchain is going to have to change in the way you operate with others and with external parties. And blockchain needs to be at the very core of your digital transformation, right? It needs to have the proper sponsorship at the top in your company. Otherwise, the program is subject to failure. Also, as I mentioned, right, in the very stages, make sure that all the right participants are on board with the project, and that includes internal stakeholders, C-suite, but also, very important, as different parties are involved, there needs to be some sort of buy-in and a sponsorship from all the parties that are participating, and that's your suppliers, your clients, your own enterprise. And in the very early stages, that I'll explain more later, in the early stages, consortium, right? So consortium, it's key to failure or key to success in any blockchain implementation. And there are basically 4 considerations that worth looking at when joining or creating a consortium, which is what is going to be your decision-making authority. Funding, right? Because it's money. Where the funding is going to come from, and how the revenues are going to be shared, how the legal entities are structured, and the identification of intellectual property, right? and often, right, there are issues, right, because the buyer and the seller, they operate with different sources of the same truth, one with their own individual ERPs, and this can lead, right, to inconsistent information between stakeholders and systems. And at the end of the day, this is increased cost and increased waste in controlling and performing reconciliations, which blockchain, it's what basically results, right? With your secure transactions, secure blocks, with your hashes, this is what blockchain brings with it. Phil, you were gonna comment here? So looking at implementation, right? As I said, RPA, blockchain, they can come together very nicely. They can be standalone projects. But many companies, when they are looking at deploying solutions like this, they use the phrase, right? Think big, start small, scale fast. At Chessy, we like to say it very simple, right? It's crawl, walk, run. And we recommend that before starting any project like this, you need to perform a quantitative and qualitative process diagnosis. And then this is aimed to discover the best process to start a blockchain or even an automation project. And these factors will help you to determine whether blockchain technology could be a viable solution for your use case. And I keep saying use cases because we're gonna refer to them at the end of the presentation, but pick the right use cases with the proper return on investment. It's critical to succeed. And just as any other project, you want to make sure that you create your priority list, that you select those cases that are not the most complex cases to use. So this letter of credit, it was very simple. It's very straightforward, and we like to use it because we can all understand it, and we can all feel the pain when there are different versions to the same letter of credit, right? And if you think about it from a different aspect, right? Think about procure to pay, right? And the characteristics of a procure to pay process. It includes several participants in terms of sellers and buyers, and it includes different versions of your information, right? So this is what blockchain is trying to tackle, right? And as I said before, process assessment, very important. Process selection is the foundation of a successful project. You have to learn where and when a blockchain makes sense. Pick one case. Talk about minimum viable product. So what is reasonable to bring as a proof of concept? You, of course, right? Phil shared vendors. The selection of the blockchain technology that you're going to use is super important here. And also when going through your proof of concept, using best practices and using agile methodologies becomes very important. Developing the right operating and governance model is another key success factor. And consortiums, right? Consortiums, join one, create one, critical to success. Okay, so we're gonna jump to 5 pillars. Before I move to 5 pillars, and we at Chessy, we like to look at technology products in these five spaces. But before I jump into this, I just want to know, Phil, if you have any additional comment here so far.
No, I think we've got about 15 minutes left, Chewy. So so hopefully we have some time at the end to take some questions. I know we're covering a lot today, and the purpose of that is obviously one of the advantages of doing this through a webinar is that we can cover a lot, and then you can revisit it in your own time and look at some of the content and hopefully understand it. Because as I said at the start, blockchain is actually, it's relatively simple, but it's also complex in how it's structured. So it's simple in its distributed ledger technology. That's actually quite simple. But how you actually go out implementing and structuring it is more complex. And that's why we're going to talk a little bit about that here and some case studies to help you sort of unwrap that for yourselves. So go ahead, Chewy.
Yeah. So first step is very important. You select the right use case by driving a process suitability assessment or a process discovery assessment. And this is key input, right, to develop your strategic roadmap. There needs to be a deep understanding of what is the issue that you are trying to resolve, clear definition of the use case, outline objectives, and very clear delineated scope. And the success, according to our experience, the success of a proof of concept is the right process discovery, right? We at Chessy have a tool where we have embedded a number of algorithms using key quantitative and qualitative data to determine the viability of a blockchain project, the complexity of the project in itself, and the expected return on investment. Proof of concept, right? It's how do you prove to the business that blockchain automation is gonna has value for the company and has a use case for it. So we always recommend, right, drive process suitability for 3 to 5 candidate process. Use our Chessy assessment tool, identify your most viable candidate, run with it, go through proof of concept, selection of vendors, selection of the consortium, and then you're ready to move to production. Proof of concept, center of excellence, right? So we hear a lot about center of excellence, and actually a center of excellence is not a prerequisite to launch any blockchain project. But if you really wanna move to production, if you really wanna scale it, you need a central governed body, right? So COE, it's not just a bunch of people developing blockchain technology, but it's actually business and technology and stakeholders and your organization and your business rules and your consortium. So creating the right framework to govern your blockchain project becomes critical to scale.
Yeah, and I would actually add, Chewy, because of the nature of the engagement with parties and organizations outside of your own internal firewalls, that COE becomes even more important, especially around the governance and the rules of how you're going to interact and engage, when you're going to engage, how you're going to engage, the rules of engagement through the consortia, what transactions are going to be included, what's the process for finalizing those transactions, how a smart contract's going to be dealt with. That COE becomes even more important than it would be for an internal hyperautomation. We still believe COEs ultimately, as Chewy mentioned, from a scalability across the organization and a fundamental leverage and consistency is important for internal hyperautomation, but we just say that it becomes even more important, and especially also the synergy between technologies. How are you going to manage the RPA versus the AI versus where blockchain comes in, and how are you going to manage that? So the rules are important. And again, there's a lot of, there is additional complexity in this. I've touched on that. The logic and the process, actually, when you break it down, is fairly simple, but the how you run it is important. That's again where the COE can be very important.
Totally agree, Phil. And even to select technologies, right? And it's not about each company. When you think about the 90s, each company would select its own ERP. It's almost changing your mindset, because when you come to a blockchain project, there's a lot of agreement that needs to take place among different parties with different interests and objectives, right? So it's almost changing your mindset on what blockchain it's gonna mean for the organization in terms of change management. I'll jump to that chart. So we at Chessy use Agile methodologies for automation and for blockchain projects. We follow 6 steps in an agile way. Managed services is very important, right? Troubleshooting, support, maintenance, account management, and so forth. So in the interest of time, I'm going to jump to case studies. I feel I'm going to take the lead here, right? But feel free to jump in. We have a number of use cases that you can read after the session and refer to after the session. But we picked a few for you, and just to talk through something that is more familiar, right? So this is an airline case study, GB Aviation's digital group, and the objective, right? The objective of this case study was to address inefficiencies, potential fraud, regulatory compliance, and utilization of the parts for the airplane. And what the solution brought to the table is that by using blockchain, GE Aviation's digital group was able to replace the paper documentation, improve the track and trace. Phil mentioned, right? It's almost like a supply chain example. So you can improve your track and trace and look at it over time and creating a group of partners, right? So the players, one of the players, as you can see in the chat, right? It's that the blockchain collaboration with GE helped this team to save more than $10 million in unsettled cash and revenue sharing reconciliation. So avoiding that, lengthy reconciliation, and think about it globally, right? Don't think about it in a country. Think about it multinationals, right? So
think about how much time. I was on a call yesterday with a client actually yesterday about something, but this just reminded me. Think about how much time and effort and energy is spent and wasted on reconciliation, right? I'm not saying this technology is applicable everywhere, absolutely not, right? But where you do get these immediate settlement of agreements and contracts, there is no reconciliation because it's already agreed. So it's the processes leading up to the point of confirmation that Chewy sort of touched on earlier on around, the inputs to a process to get to the point where you can agree. Once you've agreed, bang, you're done. That is reconciled. There is no reconciliation. And that when you think about it in the context of so many elements of processing, especially in finance, that is a tremendous potential opportunity as you partner with third parties, supplier reconciliation, customer reconciliation, tracking, as Chewy mentioned, tracking goods and parts and products throughout your organization. You clearly need to engage with somebody else. You can't do it on your own. Then that's where all these consortia come in. But think about the applications of this potentially in the future. Now, is it going to happen overnight? No, because this is different. This is different. It's about thinking outside of your organization. That's why the take-up may be, actually, if I was going to comment, it's been a little bit slower, or not a little bit slower than maybe some of the people suggested, because it takes an element of trust and understanding and partnership. But once that's in place, the applications are significant.
And Phil, you brought a very interesting point, right? When we go about assessing, performing assessments for different processes to select your best candidate for blockchain, reconciliation is the first word we tend to use, right? So if you just throw the reconciliation word to an accounting team, to a supply chain team, to an HR team. So just throw reconciliation words out there, right? And start the brainstorming on the potential. So it's almost like your leading discussion starts with, how do you remove completely a reconciliation process across intercompanies and with suppliers and with clients, right? Another case study, this comes from Microsoft. And this is focused on the situation is that there was a very slow and inefficient financial reporting system for compensating game publishers. So Microsoft wanted to reduce the statement access for the Xbox game publishers. The solution, it's blockchain, right? So it's a blockchain-based solution to offer and to secure royalty information to all of the publishers using its own cloud version of blockchain service, and that reduced, right, the infrastructure engineering costs, and the impact is now that the publishers gain immediate, right, real-time access to what they are going to earn at the end of the day, what they are going to earn with a single source of truth. Another blockchain case study in the finance industry. And the objective was digitalization of a solution was used to tackle fraud, to increase efficiency in terms of trade, and enhance the trust and accelerate the access by reducing operational procedures, lowering the risk of failure. Authorized parties included banks, right? So it's not about only internal, it includes traders, energy corporates, inspection companies, and a broader ecosystem to participate.
So it's interesting as you look on the right, the Congo Consortium here. It's a word that we've seen used as coopetition, right? Some of these guys compete with each other, but they're cooperating to compete, but they're doing it for the benefit of both organizations and the industry in general, and obviously the consumer customer as well.
Agreed. Customer management, the digitalization of meta capital to save costs, ensure accuracy, and achieve better oversight for all of the investors. So the way blockchain was used here, it's to secure the transactions around the management of real estate assets, for compliance purposes, to validate know your customer profile, and to issue the shares to each verified investor, right? That was previously verified with this feature, right, of know your profile. So the 5 steps are that inviting potential investors to create accounts, know your customer compliance, and upload all requirement documentation to the platform. These documents were processed by blockchain through MetaCapital. And upon completion, investors would receive a receipt of the sale detailing the characteristics, secure characteristics, trusted characteristics, and the link to the transactions that took place in the blockchain. Another example, right? The U.S. Drug Supply Chain Security Act mandated unit-level tracking and traceability for pharmaceuticals, and blockchain, right? It's according to the co-founder of DM, blockchain is an amazing way to accomplish this secure and traceability of all the pharmaceuticals. So the challenge was active clinic studies have nearly doubled over the last 10 years.
Chewy, I think we've got about 5 minutes left, so we probably should try and just take a couple of questions if we can. I think you've got one more case study. Again, we'll share this after. This one is about potential for the supply chain associated with the distribution of COVID-19 vaccine, which we thought was interesting. But anyway, with 5 minutes, that was the last slide. So with 5 minutes left, yeah, do we have any questions, Jordan?
Hi, we do have a couple of questions. I want to remind everyone that they can submit their questions by clicking the Q&A on the right-hand side, making sure to enter their name and typing in their question to hit send. While we wait for more people to send through their questions, I wanted to know, what is the difference between blockchain and distributed ledger technology?
Okay, I'll quickly take that, Chewy, and then you can take the next one if we have any time. But effectively, blockchain is a form of DLT, right? Distributed ledger technology. Distributed ledger technology already exists as a concept, but blockchain is a form of DLT, right? It's a and I touched on this right at the start. It's a distributed database that's peer-to-peer outside the network. So effectively, it's a distributed outside your network, ledger-based technology. So distributed ledger technology is out there. A blockchain is a unique form of that, and I touched on it earlier on. So if you can go back to that, it's unique in the format of its blocks that are linked together, and they're basically time stamped and security stamped by these hashes we mentioned. But it is a form of distributed ledger. So if you think of it in that way, I found it quite easy to help me understand what it is when I thought about it in that way.
And I also, there's also another question. I wanted to know, what's the biggest challenge of implementing a technology like blockchain?
Yeah, so I'm going to say, and then I'm going to definitely hand over to Chewy. So a lot of this is we've touched on it. Again, in principle, it's quite simple, but in setting it up and running it, it's quite complex. So there's a lot of unknowns. So it's a lot of fear about the unknown, working outside of your own network, security concerns, which actually that can be addressed because it's highly secure, but you still have to do it. But then you get into data privacy. So if it's transparent, does that mean everyone can see it? Well, no, not if you set it up with a permission network, and you can use actually things called bulletproofs, but I won't go into that right now. That's a new technology. But it's the fear of the unknown, it's security concerns, it's working with other parties, what consortia to work with. There's a lot of steps you have to take. Chewy, did you have any thoughts on that question?
Again, I always go back to use cases, right? Many challenges that we're seeing is that organizations struggle to find the right use case for them to bring forward as a proof of concept, right? So it's what you said, Phil, which is the unknown, fear to the unknown, and not being able to clearly picture what blockchain is and the applicability. But then once you go over that, how do you find the right use case? And process suitability assessments, right? It's what companies are asking us today, and finding the right implementation partner as well.
So I'm mindful that we have about 2 minutes left. I wanted to ask whether you would prefer to have some closing statements or reference back to that last case study that you had before.
So I would just say is closing, I'll let Chewy finish it up, but you know, this is definitely new. It's definitely advanced. Of course, the pundits were saying it was going to grow a lot quicker than it has. But the point is that the opportunity is huge. So it's going to grow, and it's going to go like probably exponential as organizations and consortia and platforms get more understood. Forget Bitcoin. That's clearly an exciting application of it. But if you think about it in the concepts that we described around business use, the application and the potential benefits are huge. It's not going to replace internal transactions, but it's going to and systems, but it's going to be a huge enabler on top of that. So to Chewy's point, think about the use cases, work with a provider, an appropriate provider. It's been going for a while now. There are trusted providers. There are a lot of case studies out there, a lot of good examples. There are consortia exist. We can help you with all of that. But take the first steps, just like we were talking about RPA, quite frankly, 4 or 5 years ago. We were saying the same things, right? Okay, this is different, but take those first steps, understand, and then you'll see this growth over the next few years. Don't know the exact timing, but you'll see it. Chewy, did you have any closing thoughts?
Just my last closing thoughts, and we discussed that already. It's remove reconciliations, get rid of reconciliations, and that's what blockchain can bring to the table for you.
Okay, great.
Thank
you.
Thank you so much, Phil. Thank you so much, Chewy. I really appreciate that you came on this morning to discuss this technology. And as you mentioned, Phil, 5 years ago, we were talking about RPA, and it's very interesting to hear that what blockchain could bring to the table and what we'll be talking about in 5 years' time as well. For those